Hi guys, so today I'm having a sit down with one of the best human beings that I personally know. Having worked in the wildlife sector for over 45 years, Ali Kaka is a wildlife connoisseur, if you will. He's a global icon, my mentor, and the wildlife advisor to the Cabinet Secretary of Tourism and Wildlife in Kenya, Najib Balala. Welcome to my channel.
Thank you, Brian.
All right. So Ali, I want us to talk about wildlife. But first I want to know how you started, with wildlife. So you're born in Mombasa in the 50s and you've served in the wildlife sector for 45 years, over 45 years. And now you're the VP of IUCN and the Regional Council of Africa. How did your desire of wildlife come about and, conservation as well?
Thank you, Brian. I was always interested in animals since I was a little kid. I got into trouble many times because of that. I sleep with my cats and my mother didn't like it. So that's how I started my passion with animals. And, I always felt that I could understand animals and so on. So that's how the passion grew for animals in general. And then, of course, I went through my school years. I went abroad. I did my university education. And while there, I decided to take biology and zoology as my main subjects because, the passion for science. In high school, primary school, I was terrible in all the other subjects except Kiswahili and science. And even in science, it was specifically biology and zoology. The rest, hopeless. So I graduated and then I came back in 1977, back home. And there was only one thing on my mind, and what that was to work for wildlife. While in the States, everybody associated you with wildlife, not livestock or domestic animals, but wildlife. So I began to build that interest now in wildlife as well. But when I came back, things weren't that easy. Jobs weren't easy to get. And there was a lot of racialism. What were we calling them? Reverse color bars that time. So it wasn't easy for me to get in. And I didn't know anyone of influence or importance to get, a job in the wildlife department. Anyway, for a couple of years, I just sort of hung around the periphery, and then all my relatives were saying, you see, hopeless. You should have taken business. You would be now working with us in our spares shop or hardware shop or something like that. So they wouldn't even look at me. But I still had the passion, so I didn't give up. And finally, I got a job as a casual employee in late 1970, 1980. And a casual employee is somebody who gets paid monthly, kibarua, with all
the knowledge that you
yes.
had. Yeah.
I said, fine, whatever, I just want to work for wildlife. So I started off in the research department. And there was a dingy office in Museum Hill those days for the game department. Those days, they were separated. There was game department, which dealt with wildlife outside, including hunting and control, problem animals. So that was game department. And then there was the National Parks department.
So back then hunting was legal?
Yes, it was very legal. It was going on. And there were a lot of people involved in that business and so on. So I was in the research department of the game department, or research unit of the game department. And they said, well, we just do this paperwork. And they had a project called the Wildlife Literature Search Project. And they were looking at all the existing literature on wildlife, all the research that had been done on wildlife. And we were supposed to read every article on wildlife and then record them in a separate form under different categories. And this was supposed to be the data center for all wildlife knowledge or research that had been done in Kenya and East Africa. Of course, I thought this was just such a stupid waste of time, you know. I want to be out there. I want to be in the field, you know. What is this?
Yeah.
But that actually was the beginning of my learning. Not school, not university, nothing else. What is wildlife really? And you know, the details about wildlife, the whole situation about wildlife, about the animals, natural history of the animals. I learned so much that still doesn't exist in the books. But research, you know, people pick topics and then go into depth of that particular subject. So I learned so much. Yeah. And we were doing that for over a year, every day, just reading. In fact, my eyes, you know, I had, by the time we finished, I had lenses the thick of tennis balls. But anyway, that's how I started. And then the rest is history. And I slowly, you know, climbed up the ladder in the wildlife department.
So from research assistant to warden to warden.
Yeah, no, I started casual.
Casual, oh yeah.
I'm very proud, by the way,
yes.
of that title because that was my beginning.
Yeah.
You know, it was then converted to be called subordinate officer. And we used to get paid monthly 450 shillings.
Wow, 450
every
shillings
month.
Monthly.
Very proud to have that.
Yeah.
And then I subordinate staff, we were paid 1,000 shillings. You know, imagine the. Yeah. And then from there I got finally a chance, and I was told, okay, go to Naivasha for a training course. It was a paramilitary come academic. And academic, I didn't really need it, but what the hell. I went there, a paramilitary, that was my first induction in paramilitary stuff. It was a 2-year course. Because of funding, they pushed it to 3-year course, so you're stuck there for 3 years. After that, I was then given a title of assistant warden. But anyway, I missed one step. Before that, while I was in the research department, I used to sometimes run away from the reading and go for capture operations. I made friends with the head of capture unit at that time. That's what it was called, the capture unit, which was in the same office. And that was my first experience with real field work. And because I didn't have a title or a position, I just, you know, jump in the truck and stand in the back. Imagine standing in the back of that truck going from here to Isiolo and to, you know, those far away places. Yes.
And by capture, what do you mean? What did they do? What was their role?
This was capturing live animals and moving them, translocating them to another place.
And this was physically? You capture, you put it in a truck and...
Oh yeah. I mean, those days the techniques were very different than they are now. Even then they were considered advanced because they were using drugs for the first time. Yeah. Chemical capture. Before that, in the old colonial days, there were no drugs, and capture was being done by these farmers, you know, ex-farmers who called themselves wardens and so on. And they used to chase the animals with a rope or a lasso, you know, around, and then hold them back and then pull them down. It was very physical, and there were movies made about that as well. You know how the macho men used to capture animals. Then drugs were discovered, and they were using now drugs to immobilize the animal using darts fired from a rifle. And that basically is a tranquilizer. That puts the animal down, but still has its essentials working. So then you can tie them up and then put them on a truck. And even putting them on the truck was a physical exercise. You pull it up a truck or push it up a truck, and this included even elephants, for that matter. Then they got winches, this winch, electric winch, and that things became easier. But still, they were being winched up a roller,
And this is an animal that does not want to get captured.
Oh, no, of course not. And then, so it was all very physical, and you had to be physical and tough to do that. Of course, nowadays everything's very mechanical. You have animals being plucked, airlifted, and, pussycat stuff.
Yeah, because I remember a few months back we were at Ngulia, and I witnessed the ear notching of a rhino, and it was shot from a helicopter. Same with an elephant, and then you wait for it to fall down, and then you ear notch it or collar, and then you're done, and you go back to your chopper. And
exactly, and the aircraft tells you where it is. You could basically walk there, navigate your way. Sometimes, of course, the animal is also unpredictable, so they might fall in an area where there's no road or anything. So it's still tough now getting to the animal.
Yeah.
And after that, it becomes mechanical. But it is a very physical exercise even today, despite the mechanical stuff. So I don't want to play that down. It is a dangerous field as well. But it's easier than it was before, but it's evolved like everything else. It's evolved. There's more technology coming in. Use drones locate animals and monitor them and so on. So it's interesting, if you read what used to be there and what is there now.
Yeah. And through that, what do you think of some of the challenges that rangers face in the field that we don't know about?
Well, the rangers' work is in the field, on the ground. And every day you go out there, there is no predictability what you will come across. Even with modern technology and surveillance equipment and everything, every day is different and every day is a challenge. And it's, your life is basically on the line every day, not just from poachers who, again, have become very sophisticated, more sophisticated than they were during our days. The rangers, of course, have also sophisticated equipment and firearms, but still, it's a danger, and you face that every day. And then there's the animal as well. I mean, this is wildlife. These are not domestic animals, and the wild animal reacts according to its instinct. So never assume that any particular animal is so tame, so nice, cuddly, and so on. When you're out there in the field, you have to be alert that simple animal, that tame-looking animal can kill you.
Yeah, it doesn't know that you're there to protect it.
Oh, and then you go into areas where, sometimes there are no roads or just bush, and you don't know what's behind the bush. A lot of rangers have lost their lives because of the poachers, but also wildlife at the same time. And this is a daily job. You have to have that passion, to survive and to, make this kind of line of work good for you, and you're happy in your job and so on. So it's more than just a job. A lot of people come in and they think, oh, Nikazi, I'll do it from 10 to 5, 8 to 5, or whatever the thing is, but it's not. It's different. And those who remain, those who survive more than 5 years, now identify themselves with that particular job. And there is no other job in Kenya or in the world that you can compare to the job of a ranger. It is absolutely different. Forget the uniform, you know. All the other armed services have uniforms, sure. But the rangers' work, you really have to know and to learn about it and appreciate the kind of work that they do. It's different, it's very challenging under very difficult conditions. And if you last more than 5 years, you know, people should really appreciate what they do out there.
The 100-pound cat bolts out of her cage and makes a move that catches everyone off guard. Instead of taking off, she pounces toward the cab of the truck. In a heartbeat, the cat leaps up, trying to get at the ranger who's been poking her. She can't get a firm grip against the smooth surface of the truck door. The enraged leopard slides down while the terrified ranger frantically struggles to roll up the window. He's not fast enough. The angry leopard lunges at Alexander with her razor-sharp claws. She's half in, half out. The ranger is fighting for his life. Using her 3-inch-long claws on her powerful paws, she grabs Alexander's head in an effort to bite down on his neck. The leopard repeatedly slashes his head and chest here and here. She also sinks her 2-inch-long teeth into his hands. Just when it looks like the vicious cat is about to win, Alexander gets both his feet up and literally kicks the killer cat away before she delivers a fatal bite.
And what are some of the joyous moments of being a ranger? The happy moments?
Oh, happy moment is when you rescue an animal, when you save an animal, and you stop that animal perhaps being killed, and moving it from one place to another, all that, you know. That gives you a fulfillment, a satisfaction that is only spiritual, can only be compared spiritually, you know, because you have done something for God's creature. Not just a job, but you did it more than that. So that is a very fulfilling thing. You have secured an area for wildlife against all the threats that are developing around. Again, that is something that is very satisfying and fulfilling. And look at Kenya. Kenya's history in conservation is world renowned. You know, everybody talks about Kenya and its record of conservation in wildlife. And all that is because of the work that, you know, people in the field do. So all that is very fulfilling. Just saving the animal, looking after the animal, looking after the protected area, keeping it natural and wild. For all these visitors who come to Kenya to see and who don't really know the details or the depth of the work that is done to keep it that way. It's not just keeping people at the gate and closing the gate. No, it's what goes on inside those areas.
Yeah, and I was having this conversation with my friend. We went on a game drive and they saw a lion hunting down a gazelle and they were very depressed. They tried talking to them and telling them that that's the food chain, that's how it's supposed to work. You know, and 90% of the time they don't get it right. You know, they feel miserable. So you can imagine this, you know, animal has not eaten in days. And so as a ranger, is it something that when you experience that the first time, is it something that you feel bad, you know, happening and then you eventually understand?
It's because, well, partly it's because, you know, you have gone through some form of training.
Yeah.
So you expect this to happen. And you are being taught about the food chain, the instincts animals have, and how every animal has a purpose. You know, so you don't react like that. You know, and your emotions take a back seat. When you're now doing the work of a ranger, there's no room for emotions. You know, so like the emotions you see with people who don't really understand the work of looking after wildlife. They go with placards and say, don't do this, don't do that, you know. So emotions are not part of this job. Yes, you care for the animal very much and you do everything to protect it from threats, not from wildlife itself. Wildlife itself is, you know, sort of a biological function.
An ecosystem
Yes,
within
and that,
itself.
you know, every animal has a role to play. So when you see a lion kill, it's part of nature. It's part of its life cycle and the life cycle of the prey as well. And these animals have more sense than we think they do. They just don't kill any animal. It's the weak that normally get killed. So the strong will survive is a phrase that comes from wildlife. You know, and the strong then build a strong generation of animals that can resist and that can sustain the gene pool and so on. So that's nature. And what the animal is doing is what instinct tells it to do, apart from what we think is just hunger, but it's also about instincts as well. So it's all part of nature, and you shouldn't look at that, oh, that poor creature has died. Think beyond that. You know, it died because it was time for it to die. And it was part of that cycle, you know. So don't attach too much emotion to that. It's, you know, if it doesn't kill and eat, it'll die.
Yeah.
And it'll die in a worse way.
That's
It'll
true.
starve to death. And let me tell you something, these same people who may have that emotion, which is not a bad thing, but still, they should see a wild animal die from starvation. Then they will realize how terrible that death is compared to a quick death of a prey being killed by a predator.
And so let's jump to marine life in Kenya. You are the pioneer of the marine unit in Kenya back then. And I want you to tell us one sea creature that is found in Kenya that we don't talk about, that we should talk about.
Well, marine life really, you know, it was for me a huge jump from what I used to do, which was all terrestrial work. But coming from the coast, of course, I had an affiliation with the sea, marine. But it's only when I started working in the marine environment that I also began to realize what a magnificent world it is. It's a world on its own. And you have to take diving, you know, to understand, to learn about the marine world.
Yeah.
And
so,
when you go there, you see it's a world of its own. There's everything there that's above, right? So picking one particular animal, well, marine animal is a bit difficult, but you know, you have to, like you dive, so you've seen the kind of creatures they are.
Yeah.
And so few Kenyans know.
That's true.
The whole array of wildlife under the sea. You know, there is the lion, then there is the impala, the gazelle, there is the elephant. All those are there in the sea, but very few people know about them.
That's true. Based on my experience, I think what fascinated me was different colors, different shapes. You know, like stingray. You know, it's something that you cannot. If you describe to someone who's never seen a stingray, they would never believe you. You know, it's a chapati with cookie.
Exactly. That's what they will describe it as. But it's a creature, and it has its whole function in that ecosystem.
Yeah.
And then the color, you mentioned the colors. There are more colors there than there are on land.
On land, that's very true.
You know, the fish, the corals, they're so colorful in different places. You go to Pacific Ocean, they're different. You go to Indian Ocean, they're different. Atlantic, they are all so different. And then you have this little fish that small with its own colors living in the corals, and it has that function of living there. And you have to understand and learn about it. Marine scientists will kill you with the stories that they have about the marine life and what each creature does and how it functions. And again, like I said, you have the lion and you have the gazelle in the sea, and they kill each other. Sometimes even more terribly than we see lions killing a gazelle.
Yeah.
So, yeah, marine, Kenyans still need to learn a lot more about marine life, definitely. And it's under threat. Sometimes it's more severe threat than you see on land, and people react to it and support it and so on. But there are more threats in the sea than there are on land. People don't know.
Yeah. Let's talk about the wildlife census that just happened a few months ago in Kenya, 2021. And based on the results, I participated in the census, which was a really good thing that I did, and I learned a lot from it. And based on the results that we got, there was an increase in wildlife in Kenya over the years, but also with that, there's an increase in human-wildlife conflict, which is a catch-22, because you want to preserve our environment, including the wildlife, and you want to increase the numbers, but then again also the population is increasing, and wildlife and human beings have to coexist. What do you think about that?
Well, the census did show quite a number of species that we thought had declined, actually have recorded increase. And then there are others, of course, that still do show decline, that are not known. We always think about elephants and rhinos and lions, but there are others out there. Sable-roan antelopes, they're disappearing. So it's both situations. You have an increase, you also some that are under threat and decreasing. But the issue of human-wildlife conflict, it is now the number one threat to wildlife in terrestrial areas, because there's more demand for land, for agriculture, infrastructure, and of all forms of development because of increasing populations, and that means increase in demand for resources. So of course, there is more and more pressure on wildlife, and it's not going to stop. It's going to continue. What we need to do is really to think far ahead and begin to come up with policies and approaches that balance the two. You can't say we are going to stop reproducing as humans. You try that, you won't last long wherever you are. So that side is constant. It's going to continue. Wildlife needs space. We need wildlife as an economic product, to put it in very stark terms. And we also need wildlife for nature and for our own well-being as well. So we need both very much. But what we have not done is to balance the two. Land use is being considered and done by a separate group of people and organizations and departments, and they don't consider this other part. So the two really must gel, must talk to each other in Kenya as a nation. So land use planning must be very strict, that you can do this in this, but you cannot do this in this particular place because of the natural environment, the wildlife in it, and so on. And these two don't really talk to each other. So you see sometimes something happening right next to a park by another department of government. And they've not even considered the park and the wildlife there. And then you end up with conflicts. And people are allowed to settle in areas that the wildlife migratory routes without considering that it will have an impact on the wildlife, and wildlife is going to fight back to get the land back, you know, in any way that they can, by going through or destroying what's on the way, sometimes killing people as well. So conflicts in Kenya right now are the biggest problem that we have, and we must find a solution that involves all the players, because we've just been talking to each other, you know, conservation is talking to each other and blaming everybody else, but not realizing that there's also need for development, but that development also needs to talk to the needs of nature.
Yeah. There's Ali Kaka you, and then there's Ali Kaka the chimp in Alpajeta Conservancy that was rescued in Sudan in 2007. Yeah. Tell me about him.
Yeah, you know, the funny thing, well, it's funny to me, but not to my family, is that when you Google, first thing that comes up when you Google my name is the chimp.
It's the chimp.
It's more famous than I am. So, you know, friends of my family, and they, you know, and they Google and they find them. They say, well, okay. Telling my wife, you married a chimp. We didn't know. So, you know, it's funny in that sense. So, you know, my namesake, actually, the name was given by Olpajeta when I rescued the animal when I was in East African Wildlife Society. And the information came to us, and the animal was being prepared for the port by the soldiers there during the war. And this information came, so we all had to mobilize quickly. I saw the ambassador and I pleaded and so on. So he was good enough to send information back to save. There were 3 chimps actually, to save them from the port. And then I processed the CITES permits, because this is another thing that you need in an endangered animal, is to get the permits from CITES. So that took a bit of time and so on. And then we flew to Sudan, took the animal, brought it back, the 3 of them. And the only place was Olpajeta, which had a chimp sanctuary. And it's the best chimp sanctuary that we have now in Kenya. And remember, chimpanzees are not found in Kenya. The closest chimpanzees we have are in Uganda and Rwanda. So this is not the natural environment for chimpanzees in Kenya. But because we have the sanctuary where orphans are brought, and because of the trade in chimps, at least it used to be very active back then, we used to confiscate chimps being transported to other countries as pets and so on. That's how the chimp sanctuary was started. So that was the obvious place to take them, and then because I brought them and I felt very close to this particular one, they named him after me. I'm very proud of that, by the way. You know, very proud. I sent people there. I said, go and see Ali Kaka.
And now he's the alpha male.
He's alpha male. He was ousted and he came back in. You know, I wish I had that trait, but I don't. But yeah, he's the alpha male. He's the boss.
Yeah.
There's a lot of aggression. If the high-ranking ones feels that the low-ranking ones have been fed before them, they'll be aggressive towards them. So that is some of the cases where we have to avoid.
out of the lot here, who's the boss? Who ought to be fed first?
The alpha male here is Ali Kaka. There he sits, yeah?
All right, there.
Yeah, there he
his
sits.
Banana.
He hasn't been the alpha male for long.
Oh, wow.
And he has fought for this position almost for 2 years now. But now he's very successful that he's the alpha male. This was the previous alpha male.
Was this Oscar?
Oscar, this is, yeah.
Yes,
Oscar is the
so
previous
Oscar
alpha male.
used to be the alpha male. Now he's sort of lower ranking. Yeah. You know, I'm also watching how they're eating, very much like humans. Yes. Chimpanzees, share a very close DNA to human beings. Yes. What is the percentage?
Well, scientists say that we share more than 98% of our genes with chimpanzees. Wow. So this 98%. Means they are so close to humans. In fact, they are more closely related to humans than they are closely related to the gorillas.
Really?
Yeah, so it is that close.
And then one of the biggest wildlife conservationists and also wildlife filmmakers and producers in the world is Sir David Attenborough. Yeah, and you've met him before. Tell me about him.
Well, yeah, he is a grand old man. Now, that man should be considered a saint in conservation. You know, it's not just about filmmaking. To him, it's a calling. You know, he's doing it because he believes in what he's doing and really very passionate. I have met, I would say, no one like him in my entire life in conservation. You know, he's a man who thinks, drinks, eats everything about conservation. And then he is the one voice that earns the respect of everyone in the world. And you know, I was honored to meet him a couple of times actually, because I'm a judge on the Tusk Trust Awards, Prince William Awards, so we go judging and giving awards to upcoming conservationists in Africa. And he's a regular guest. And the one time also was we were giving him an award, and he didn't know. Just invited him to attend, and he showed up, and he didn't know, but Prince William was going to give him an award for conservation. And he said to me that, you know, this is the one award that I shall cherish for the rest of my life. He's got loads and loads of awards, but he said this one somehow is different because I am being equated once with the people actually who do the work on the ground that I go to report on. You know, I feel privileged to be part of that. I mean, that's how humble he is, equating himself to the rangers that we give awards to, the field wardens that we give awards to. And he said, I feel equal to them, not above them. He's Sir David and so on. But he says, I feel honored. And you could see tears welling up in his eyes, that I'm equal to these guys. No one has given me that honor. And it's something to think about when you mention the work of the rangers. Somebody that iconic feels he's an equal to that ranger.
So Nairobi National Park is going to be 75 years this year. Do you have some memories of Nairobi National Park? You know.
Yeah, you know, first of all, this was the first park that was created. And that time, of course, there was nothing here. It was all wildlife. And it shrunk over time. And now it's basically an island, you know. So it's got a very long history of wildlife conservation. It's more or less the the flag bearer of parks or protected areas in Kenya. I came to work here, I think it was in 95, 97, 8, somewhere around there. And when I came, there was a lot of human-wildlife conflict because of cattle coming in, lions going out, and so on. And then development, industrial development was really kicking off at a very high pace at that time. And so we had to keep all that at bay, you know, on a daily basis. People building inside the park, people bringing cattle in, lions going out, and so on. That was to me, you know, a daily job in the park. So, you know, those days also, the park warden was different. He woke up in the morning, from 5 he was in the park. You know, that was his office in the morning. And we got to the office in the afternoon to do the paperwork. There was one warden, David Sheldrick. His name was Sanane. He was given the name Sanane because everyone who went to him, I have a problem, I have this Sanane, Kuja Sanane. But that was the system that we were brought up in. You know, you don't go to the office. You go to your first office, which is the park. So that was the way we worked here. We even used to go to Buruburu those days, you know, and pick up leopards that used to go all the way there.
All the way to Buruburu?
All the way to Buruburu, and Rongai, of course, was a regular thing.
Tell me about that, a leopard in Buruburu.
Yeah, we don't know how the hell it got there, but you know, they have ways, you know. They use the tunnels and they use culverts and so on, and slowly creep its way at night. Leopard is a nocturnal animal, so it got out. And leopards love dogs, by the way.
Ah, okay. Love them to eat them.
Oh, yes. So, you know, they found it in the estate. Those days was just Buruburu phase 1. It was there in the estate. And we got called and we went out there to capture it. Wow. And of course we used nets to catch it.
Yeah.
So, you know, again, that was the one thing that was very rare, but it happened and we got it back in safely. And also no one got killed. And then also Upper Pangani. No, Ngara. Yeah. Another leopard went out there and was found, you know, walking on the streets.
In broad daylight.
In broad daylight. But those days also there were less people. Yeah. And people were less active at night, unlike now. So the animal felt safe and roamed everywhere.
Paint me a picture of the future of wildlife.
Yes, a very interesting question. You know, if you cast your mind to another 10 years of wildlife conservation in Kenya, I think it'll be very different to what we see now. First of all, starting from the parks themselves, there are likely to be more islands. Not all, but most of them will end up being islands or protected areas. And especially if we continue with the way we are doing now, without the conversation between the development and conservation being really a genuine, sincere conversation. You'll have parks that are small, smaller than they are now, and islands without much movement outside. Wildlife numbers again, I don't think we are going to see the same abundance that we enjoy today. There are likely to be less animals, because climate change is going to be changing the kind of vegetation we have and so on, and the space. Loss of habitat is another huge challenge Kenya has. So, you know, look at other developed countries as well. They have the same challenge. They used to have wild, huge, open spaces, which they don't have now. So, as much as I think even if today there was this sudden change of heart and we now have real good conversations between development and conservation, it's not really going to happen or likely to happen to the extent that we hope it would. As I said, human populations are going to be increasing, demand will continue to increase, so we should be looking at a whole different scenario in wildlife conservation for the future, maybe even foreseeable future. We should be really concentrating on how much we can save now, the space that we have now, and securing them and making sure they're viable enough to maintain the wildlife populations, minimal wildlife populations, as well as the habitat that they have. But I'm sorry, you know, this is to me what the future looks like every time I think about it. And then, you know, as much as we want to be romantic and we want to be sentimental and we want to be dreamy about it, reality is what I see in the future. We will have animals, we will have wildlife, we will have protected areas, but they'll not be in the sense that we have today. And that's going to be the reality for the future.
Right, and one more question. What's your favorite wildlife attraction in Kenya?
Area.
Area.
I thought you'll ask me which animal.
Yeah.
And people always freak out when I tell them which is my favorite animal.
What's your favorite animal?
Because they think romantic. They think, you know, they'll come up with this, oh, nice, beautiful animal. But the baboon is my favorite animal. As destructive, as annoying it is, but it gave me so much fulfillment, so much spiritual growth and comfort when I was out there in the bush with no family or anything, and facing all these threats and dangers and a miserable life with a miserable pay. It gave me, and you need to just go where there's a troop of baboons, switch off your car, sit and watch them.
Okay.
Just try that. You know, just try that and you'll see what I mean.
Okay. And an area?
Okay, I'm strange, but you try that and you see.
I'll try it.
Yeah. An area, which is the best area, I loved Meru. Meru still stands out as one of my favorite places. The time I worked there, it was different to what it is now. Meru had so many rivers and streams everywhere, and wildlife was, you know, they didn't even need to go out those days, except for elephants, which went out and were shot. But
and now they have one of the biggest populations of rhinos.
Yes, because the sanctuary, it started as just a white rhino sanctuary, but now has black rhinos as well, and most successful. One of the most successful rhino sanctuaries we have today is Meru. So I would encourage people to go to Meru. You know, people hear about Amboseli, Nairobi, Tsavos, and very little about Meru. But it's worth going and spending a few days there. Don't go then run back to Meru town.
Yeah, I have a funny experience in Meru. The last time I was there, I slept with the bandas, the Kenya Wildlife Service bandas. And when I used the bathroom in the morning, I woke up, there was a frog attached to the bowl.
There you go. You see, that's the beauty of being in the bush. You have company in your toilet
In
too.
the toilet bowl. And
and Kora. You know, Meru Kora is next to each other.
Yeah.
And if you really want wilderness experience, go to Kora. You'll come back to your city life a changed person.
All right, Sasa. Thank you so much, Ali.
You're most welcome.
Right, thank you.
Good.
Good.
Pleasure.
That was fun.